So the company that makes OZEMPIC is being sued right now in federal court, not by like 1 or 2 people, but thousands of people. And I'm gonna bet that none of you have heard about it. Maybe you have, but no one in my life has heard of it, and that's a little bit scary considering that I have people in my life very close to me who are on Ozempic. So, if you are on Ozempic or you're considering, you know a lot of people, this is an episode that you're gonna wanna watch. So grab your flashlight and follow me down the trail, because tonight, we're in for a ride. So in my last video, part 2 of this whole series, we talked about the side effects. So if you haven't watched it, go watch that because this episode will be building on top of it. So tonight's question that we're uncovering is a little bit simpler on top and a little bit messier underneath. Why are pharmaceutical companies being sued by their own customers? What are they arguing? And what evidence does each side have to back itself up? So I'm not going into this with a verdict already in my pocket, okay? First off, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a doctor, I didn't experience this, and second off, that's up to you to decide. Over here on my channel, we all think for ourselves, and that includes you. So I am just here to present all of the facts that I have found, and you can do with them whatever you will. Because what I do have is every public filing for both of these cases, and I'm going to walk you through exactly what's in each one. So, not each one, that would take years. Okay, there are thousands of pages of documents here, okay? We're not going to get into every single one, but we're going to go over the basics. Here is what I found. So, our story here, it starts back in February of 2024. There had already been thousands of individual lawsuits filed against Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly all over the country. Now, in case you don't recall, Novo Nordisk makes Ozempic, they make Wegovy, and a couple of other drugs. Eli Lilly makes things like Mounjaro and a couple of other drugs, a lot of which are named in the lawsuits. And all of these lawsuits, they were all alleging a version of the same thing. That one of these GLP-1 medicines were causing them very serious harm, and that one of these two companies, or both, did nothing to let them know what the risks actually were. So finally, in February of 2024, the court decided that there were so many of these lawsuits, and that a lot of them were very, very similar, so they ended up consolidating them into 2 massive lawsuits against Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk, both of which are named in both lawsuits. So when they consolidate a bunch of lawsuits, this is called a multi-district litigation. And they do it for obvious reasons, so that 1,000 different courts across the country don't all have to go through the same evidence, the same discovery, the same expert witnesses. They can just have one judge, one courtroom, because most of the facts are gonna end up being the same anyway. So in the 2 MDLs, the plaintiffs are essentially arguing that the company did the same thing in both. Both Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk failed to warn customers of the risks accurately enough, and they're actually even arguing that they went out of their way to promote the drug against some of the risks that they should have named. However, the reason for 2 separate lawsuits is that one of them is really heavily focused on the risk of neon, which you recall from my last video. Neon is essentially when the retinas of your eyes have kind of like a mini stroke, allegedly due to GLP-1s, and so it can cause vision blindness that's very permanent. And the other MDL is focused a lot more heavily on gastroparesis and ileus and GI injuries. All of that is named in that second lawsuit. And that one is actually the bulk of the lawsuits. But just note that the 2 companies are going to have to show up and go through 2 separate litigations for the different kinds of injuries that people have sustained, allegedly due to the GLP-1s. On the GI injury side of things, back in February of 2024, the court consolidated thousands of these cases, and they assigned them to one judge, Judge Jean Platter. 3 months in, on May 17th of 2024, Judge Platter dies suddenly. Now, the official cause of death was COPD, which is progressive lung disease that has a lot of different causes, but in this case, it moved really fast. Because Judge Platter had signed opinions on different cases literally up to 2 days before her death. So when I say that this was sudden, it was really, really sudden. She was 75 years old. And I want to be clear, I'm not bringing this up for the shock value of it. It is a little bit shocking, but this really actually matters when it comes to the case at hand. Because they had to stop everything and, mourn the loss of this honorable judge, and then reassign it to a new judge, and that could cause a whole host of problems if not done properly. And that's not a normal thing to have happen for a case of this size. So the new judge is Karen Marston, and she's had the cases ever since, and they give both of these MDLs to her. If she's already having an understanding of what the drug is and does, it makes sense for her to handle both. Now, let's get into what the people who are suing say actually happened. And again, I'm kind of going to lump both of the MDLs together because they tend to be the same story. So there's a couple of categories of injuries that people are claiming happened to them because of the GLP-1. That would be gastroparesis, bowel obstruction, gallbladder disease, and of course the NAON that we discussed earlier. And general GI symptoms that were severe enough to require hospitalization. And specifically in the gastroparesis MDL, they are claiming that there was a paper trail discrepancy that further incriminates the companies. They are claiming that ileus, which is a form of intestinal paralysis, kind of similar to gastroparesis. They're claiming that it didn't get added to the warning label until years, like 13 years, after the drug was already marketed for use. And even then, it wasn't added to the normal warning label section. It was added to a section called post-marketing experience, which is a section that kind of tells people what others have experienced after taking the drug, but it wasn't ever officially put in the warning label section. Victoza launched in 2010, and ileus wasn't added to that post-marketing experience section until 2023. OZEMPIC launched in 2017, and again, ileus wasn't added until 2023. 13 years. That's how long the gap was, for Victoza at least. That's a long time. That's a long time. You would think that the companies would have been very much aware of the ileus risk long before that. But who's to say, right? So here's the company's response to all of this, and it's a little bit different than just like, well, we warned you, because kind of they didn't, allegedly. What the actual position is that most of the people who are claiming they have gastroparesis, they don't actually have it. Or at least they don't have like a confirmed diagnosis. Because of 54 cases that were alleging they had gastroparesis, only 8 of them included the objective testing actually required to diagnose gastroparesis. What the companies are arguing is that gastroparesis symptoms, like nausea and bloating, they tend to happen in about 1 in 4 adults generally, diabetes or not, drug or not. So before you even get to did the drug do this, they're arguing that you have to prove that the person even has this at all. But you know what? I'm not here to pick sides. You know what? Fuck it, I am here to pick sides. It's my own channel, what am I thinking? I'm already really skeptical of Ozempic and GLP-1s to begin with, obviously, so I'm absolutely not going to pick sides with this company who's saying, well, you've got bad symptoms, but, like, you don't have the piece of paper to diagnose it, do you? Like, shut the fuck up. I get it, I understand that that's what's required for court sometimes, but it's a pretty shitty thing to argue. I know you've been feeling really, really shitty since you took our medicine, but you can't prove that it was us. Legally, it might be okay, but morally, definitely not ethical. But I do have to admit, it's a little bit of a smarter legal strategy than I expected walking into this. I thought they were just going to be arguing, it was on the label, it's covered, but actually, their stance is a little bit more bold, and it's You know what? Prove that you're sick first. Prove it. Let's see it. You know what? If that's the goalpost that they want to move, it might just get them to win. I don't know. Hopefully not, but we'll see. One more fact worth noting, because it tells you what this case is and isn't about legally. The plaintiffs, that is, the customers, they tried to get formal legal discovery into the marketing practices of these companies. How the drugs were promoted, to who and by who, and the court said no. Denied in October of 2024. So what that leaves us with is that this case is about the warnings. The warning label, not the marketing. It has nothing to do with the marketing. And that's a whole other thing that we could get into. But the court is not about to get into it. So let's talk about where these cases actually stand today. As of the most recent order that I can find, this MDL, the gastroparesis one, has grown to about 3,000, a little over 3,000 cases that is still pending. The Neon case has grown to about 110. Both of them are currently in the expert discovery, so both sides have a lot of doctors, a lot of experts that are coming in and they're giving their testimony, and each side is arguing to throw out the testimonies that they don't want included. Novo Nordisk is doing a lot of that, by the way. The plaintiffs can have all of these experts come in and corroborate what they're saying, and Novo is just going to get them thrown out entirely. And because of all the back and forth, there's actually a hearing set for later this year that's going to talk about exactly what experts are allowed to be included moving forward. And usually, in these big MDL cases, usually the judge will pick a couple of individual cases to kind of go first and set a precedent. They want to see how the juries are going to react, you know, what kind of arguments are going to come out, what kind of evidence, and then they can move on to litigating all of it. But they haven't even chosen these cases yet, which in my opinion is kind of wild considering this has all been going on for a couple of years. But we will keep watching to see what happens, of course. Now here's the deep dive that I really wanted to do and what actually interests me the most. We all know about Novo Nordisk, we know about Eli Lilly, we know that they're massive corporations, we know the profit that they're getting every year, we know that they're trying to create obesity as a chronic disease, by getting you hooked on the drug forever. Anyway. We know about all of that. What we don't know is who the doctors are that they are including as experts in their cases, and also who their lawyers are. And as you can imagine, I wanted to know who they are. So Novo Nordisk's lead counsel is someone by the name of Lauren Brown, and they come from the firm DLA Piper. So there's actually a lot of people included from this firm, but Lauren Brown is the main spokesperson here. Eli Lilly's lawyer is James Hurst, and they are from Kirkland and Ellis firm. On the medical side, there are 4 names that show up as retained defense experts, meaning that they're coming in and they are testifying in front of court on behalf of Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly. And I don't even know how to pronounce them. I'm so sorry if I get them wrong. We have a Sunil Koliwad, who is an endocrinologist at USCF. We have Dante Ye, a trauma and critical care surgeon in Colorado. We have a Linda Wen, a gastroenterologist studying at Stanford, who specifically studies gastroparesis. And a 4th name, Mr. John Campbell, who's actually a health economist, which I didn't even know was a real thing. And I've pulled all of the federal payment records. I did not have the bandwidth or the time, because I'm doing this all by myself, to really go too deep on every single one of these, but I did find that none of them are taking money explicitly from Novo Nordisk or Eli Lilly. These aren't public, so you can of course go look them up yourself if you would like. Koliwad took $5,000 from a company called AbbVie. Ye took about $23,000, split between a couple of different companies, but neither one of them explicitly have anything to do with either of the defendants. Wen took about $26,000, mostly from a company that specializes in a gastroparesis device. And I want to say that plainly because as much as I would love to find something juicy about these doctors, I haven't. So I'm just gonna tell you the truth up front. Nothing suspicious that I have clocked. If you do your own research and you find something, please let me know. But as for now, and the limited research that I was able to do, these 4 seem to check out. I did find one thing on Kolywad though. He has testified in several cases, and several times his testimony has gotten thrown out. He hasn't had any disciplinary action against his license or anything like that, but his testimony kept getting thrown out. So I just want to flag that. But again, here's what I found, and feel free to come to your own conclusion on that. Alright, so here's my honest read on all of this, because I've given you a lot of information, and I kind of want to tie it all up here at the end. You're allowed to disagree with me if you want. Just don't tell me about it if you do. Just kidding. We're obviously very much still in the middle of this whole thing, and so nothing has been decided yet. The defendants, the company's stance being, oh, you're sick? Then prove it. Might end up being an effective strategy, albeit a really shitty one. And you know what, they're kind of partially right, that we don't actually know how many of these symptoms can be attributed to just being overweight or having diabetes, as opposed to the GLP-1 medication itself. Most of these people's symptoms don't exist in a vacuum, right? However, I will say that 3,094 incidences of this happening right after someone started taking a GLP-1 is a little bit too many for me to just shove aside. I know that a lot of people don't want to hear it, but obesity, being overweight, having diabetes, these things do affect your health, and they do put you at risk for a lot of other diseases that you might contract. And again, I am by no means any sort of expert. We're gonna hear from the actual experts about whether or not this might be something that could have happened regardless of if they were on a GLP-1 or not. However, I'm absolutely not on the side of a GLP-1, of being on a medication for the rest of your life, especially for someone who is overweight, right? They're not being treated for something like diabetes, which is a chronic condition. Obesity is something that you can get out of without a medication. And I think that being on a medication that has a laundry list of risks and side effects is not good for your health either. And I think it is probably only a matter of time before you develop a very serious condition from the medication itself. In regards to who's right and who's wrong, it might honestly be a case-by-case basis. I mean, it might very well be true that some of these people never would have contracted a condition like this were it not for the GLP-1 itself. And it might be true that some of these people were on track to have it develop before they even started at GLP-1. I simply am not the expert, and I'm not going to pretend like I am. The other thing I will say is that when you go to court, and you are suing somebody, you are the plaintiff, you're bringing the lawsuit against somebody else, you have the burden of proof to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is what happened, and this is what caused what happened to you. So unfortunately, I do believe that the plaintiffs have a really large, hard task in front of them. They're climbing a mountain, because they have to prove not only that they had the symptoms, not only that the companies didn't warn them accurately of the risks, but they also have to prove that the GLP-1 caused what they're experiencing. And that is a really, really high bar that they have to meet. So a lot of it is he said, she said, and I think it's going to be really, really hard for the people to prove that the GLP-1 is what caused the symptoms. But of course, we're going to have to wait, and we're just going to have to see how it all plays out. I would absolutely love to take a look at all the evidence that they're going to be bringing. But until then, my whole goal in bringing this to you, in hopes that you will have just a better understanding of what this drug can do for you, and what it might do to you. Because again, I just don't think that we can really trust the pharmaceutical reps or the doctors who are being paid to prescribe this to you, to really give you the full picture and the full understanding of this drug and what the possibilities are here. And when there are thousands of lawsuits against the company, again, a lawsuit is not a fact of causation, but it certainly should bring you a little bit more pause when we're talking about whether or not you should take the drug. Just food for thought, right? And I hope that by watching this series, you're able to just have a better understanding of whether or not the risks are worth it to you, and whether or not you're really taking the drug for the right reasons. So like always, if you want to fact check me, all of my sources will be linked below, and you're going to want to subscribe because next week's video is going to be getting into a lot more of the marketing that these companies have chosen for their products, and whether or not the whole shift in beauty standards is a natural thing, or whether it was being a little bit more helped along, if you catch my drift. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.